What are your thoughts on this whole situation with the Mavericks organization?
So like all of you, I'm listening very closely to Mark Cuban. I don't know. I'm sorry. Contrition. I saw contrition. But then we get to the part in the interview where Rachel Nichols says to Mark Cuban, have you reached out and talked to any of the victims of harassment and violence in your workplace? And the answer is no. So then Rachel gives him another shot and says, should you reach out to these victims? And Mark Cuban's answer is, well, I don't know the circumstances of the individuals and, the way the report is structured. Okay, stop. That's where I'm out, okay? You could get the names and phone numbers of these women in 30 seconds. I think it's very easy to apologize to nameless, faceless victims. It takes a lot more courage to personally address the people that actually have the bruises and the broken bones and the broken spirit, the people who paid the biggest price in this entire mess. But you know what? That's not how it works, right? So Urban Meyer wants to give Zach Smith another chance, but to do that, he's going to bypass the woman, the wife of Zach Smith. Mark Cuban wants to give Earl Sneed, he wants to rehabilitate him, okay? Now, Earl Sneed, for those who don't know, sent his fiancée to the hospital with bruises and a fractured wrist. He pled guilty. Mark Cuban knew all of this and allowed Earl Sneed to return to the team where, after some time, he dated a female Mavs employee and then battered her. So here's what I would like to say to Mark Cuban. If you want me to believe those crocodile tears, if you want me to believe that your apology is sincere, then here's what you need to do. You need to call up every single woman who was victimized in your workplace, your franchise fraternity frat house, and you need to sit down across from them, and you need to look them in the eye, and you need to listen to them. And you need to confront these mistakes you keep talking about. And you need to make it right with those women. And then when you do that, maybe I'll believe you actually understand what just happened here.
I agree with Jackie from the standpoint he's a terrific and a dynamic owner for the most part. I think the game of basketball, the National Basketball Association, is far more better with him than without him. Having said that, it makes it very, very difficult for me to say what I'm about to say. Mark Cuban should have been suspended for half the season. He should have been banned from NBA games. Should have been banned from the business of basketball, banned from an association with the game of basketball for 6 months. And the Dallas Mavericks should have been cost a first-round draft pick. Mm-hmm. Now, that's suffering the basketball team, and we understand that because the basketball side didn't have anything to do with the business side, and obviously there's collateral damage that comes along with that. But when you are the owner, you're not just the owner of the basketball side. You're the owner of the business side as well. And I take no pleasure in saying that because, again, I got a lot of love for Mark Cuban, but we have to pay attention to what's going on here. In fairness and in full disclosure, I've spoken to the NBA office. Their mentality has been Mark Cuban was forthcoming. Mark Cuban didn't make any excuses. Mark Cuban was incredibly cooperative. And where they distinguished the difference between him and a Donald Sterling, former owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, a Jerry Richardson, former owner of the Carolina Panthers in the National Football League, their direct actions was what was offensive and ultimately something that had to be dealt with. Mark Cuban wasn't the culprit here. To Dermy Ushery, who Jackie knows and I know or whatever, that's a name that's come up. He had cases against him dating back to 1998. I certainly didn't know that. I don't believe Jackie knew that at the time. And I can assure you that the feelings that a lot of us within the NBA community had for that man has changed, and it's changed drastically. I'm ashamed of what I've heard about him. The NBA is of the mindset that Mark Cuban didn't know anything about Dermy's actions. I find that very, very difficult to believe. I find that very difficult to comprehend. But Mark
he,
Cuban,
he was already in trouble
Right.
before Mark Cuban even took over
That's
the
right.
team.
And Mark-
he was aware of that.
But remember, Mark Cuban was on with Rachel Nichols yesterday
Yep.
and said that at the time he was so excited about the ownership situation that he hadn't paid any attention to it, so he was unaware. That's why I brought that up. But then we have Chris Hyde, a former team employee, survived numerous reports of misconduct. Earl Snead, that Jackie just brought up, 2 domestic violence situations, and she brought up the detail. Buddy Pittman, in HR director, recommended the firing of Hyde. Mark Cuban took a pass on that. So you were aware of some of the things, and you didn't do anything.